Blade Runner is a 1997 adventure game by Westwood Studios. You're playing as rookie Blade Runner Ray McCoy. At the start of the game, he's investigating a mass murder of animals. McCoy soon finds out, though, that this one crime is just part of a much bigger plot. The animals were killed by a gang of rogue Nexus 6 replicants. At this point, I have to assume you have seen the Blade Runner films, so I don't have to explain the ins and the outs, replicants, etc. Anyway, these replicants have just started on a mad crime spree. So there you go, that's it. McCoy's job is now to hunt these naughty robots down. The story does run concurrently with the original 1982 Blade Runner film, but it came out 15 years after the cinema original. Westwood pitched this idea of an original story set in the same universe, happening actually even at the same time and in the same city as the original film. It feels like McCoy is sort of following in Deckard's footsteps. The plot of the film and the game dance and spin around one another all the way through. I really like that. At times it actually feels like as McCoy walks into a room, it's like Deckard has literally just walked out of it. It is fan service, but I like that. I really love the Blade Runner movie, so being able to interact in these environments in the game, it's fantastic. But there is that cynical part of me that's like, they could have done anything. It could have been a prequel, it could have been a sequel, they could have set it in another city, they could have set it in another country, but they decided on LA in 2019. I mean, yeah, it is a little bit derivative, but for the time it is a pretty dark and a pretty unusual story. The game design in Blade Runner is also atypical for the time. Adventure games were nothing new, but the way Blade Runner works out is pretty unique. McCoy is an LA detective, even a futuristic LA detective, and so Blade Runner replaces that traditional PC adventure game inventory with a system of clues, and all of these clues just drive dialogue options. This puts the onus on sleuthing about for clues and performing actual detective work. So in that way, it feels much more like a procedural cop drama, which is actually a brilliant use of the Blade Runner IP. Every decision that you as the player make will impact the story, depending on whether you arrest, kill, or let your targets go, the way that you speak to the NPCs, the clues that you find, and the clues that you don't find all stack up, and it leads to one of 13 different endings. But wait, there's more. At the beginning of every game, the code randomly decides which characters are human and which ones are replicants, and they'll go about achieving all their little goals whether you're there or not. And this means that you could play the same game through twice, make exactly the same decision every time, but you'd still get a different ending. That's awesome. I do have to say though, by the end of that story, I definitely felt like there were loose ends that I hadn't tied up. I think it's because in order to have that branching storyline and all those different endings, a lot of the details needed to be glossed over quite quickly so that then they could still work in the wider set of scenarios. It's not really that big a deal at the end of the day because, the game doesn't paint you into a corner like some of the more egregious adventure games from this era, and maybe multiple playthroughs and a different playstyle would probably uncover more info. Blade Runner's graphical style is great. For 1997, Westwood, in my opinion, made the correct choice by sticking with 2D. Pre-rendered two-dimensional backgrounds with voxel-based 3D characters on the top. And this is a bold move. At that time, the industry was quickly moving over to adopt full 3D games. 3D was seen as the next big paradigm shift in PC game development. But, historically, we can look back and we can see that in a lot of cases, jumping on the 3D bandwagon too early was a bad move. It would have taken a studio with confidence to push back against that tide and to go, no, this is going to look better in 2D. I'm so glad that Westwood settled on this style, because while we were playing it, we openly praised this game for just nailing that Blade Runner neo-noir atmosphere. Now, that gloomy dystopian Blade Runner tone wouldn't be complete with the same care and attention to sound and music. Frank Klepacki's score is fantastic. Klepacki was Westwood old guard. He's probably best known for scoring the award-winning Command & Conquer series. Now, interestingly, Klepacki wasn't actually allowed access to the original Vangelis master recordings, so instead he reconstructed the original Blade Runner theme completely by ear. There's a few new tracks mixed in as well, with Klepacki again just nailing that synthwave cyberpunk vibe. The assembled voice cast is fantastic. Westwood did a brilliant job of assembling new and original cast members. They even convinced Joe Turkel and Sean Young to come back in, briefly appearing as Dr. Tyrell and Rachel. Unfortunately, they couldn't nail down Eddie James Olmos to come in and play Gaff. Biggest shame of the entire game, in my opinion. Standout performance, though, is Crazy Legs Larry, played by Joseph Kukan, who you might know as being Kane in every Command & Conquer game. All told, Blade Runner 1997 is a really enjoyable adventure game. The idea that everybody who plays this gets a slightly different experience is a very exciting one. High points for me are the excellent attention to world building and the richness of all those branching paths through the game. The Blade Runner PC game is unlikely to ever appear on Steam or GOG. Westwood were acquired by EA in 1998 and then fully liquidated in 2003. When the remains of all the studio equipment was moved to EA's headquarters, the source code and the assets for Blade Runner were lost. Now we're talking about a terabyte of data now in 1997 money. Despite EA owning the rights to this game, the odds of them developing a sequel or an HD remake is remote. To play this game, you're going to need to track down a physical copy or take matters into your own hands, and I'm not going to comment on that. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. For more old PC gaming videos, subscribe to The Game Show. Ta-da!
Perfect.